Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender adult care. Welcome to my channel. If you are new or a regular viewer who has not yet subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel. This is the best way you can showcase your support, especially if you're benefiting and you love the content that I create. And I would very, very much appreciate if you do subscribe. It would mean a world to me, so please do that. For today's video, I want to share with you three ways to make sense of what your gender dysphoria is trying to tell you. Three ways to have an understanding of gender dysphoric feelings. In a nutshell, as we all know, gender dysphoria is a distress. It's a psychological distress that a lot of people feel when they feel incongruent in disalignment with their assigned gender. Now, of course, you can Google DSM criteria of gender dysphoria. You will get DSM is Diagnostic Statistical Manual. You will get, excuse me, a clinical presentation of qualifiers that clinicians look for to put down diagnosis of gender dysphoria. I'll give you a broad idea of how clinicians look at gender dysphoria. But in a nutshell, gender dysphoria is feelings that distress, feelings that disconnection with your assigned gender. As I always shared on this channel, gender dysphoria as a psychological distress can stem from multiple root issues, root causes. As I said, cisgender people can experience gender dysphoria. People who had ongoing prolonged exposure to, for example, sexual trauma can experience gender dysphoria. And of course, undeniably, individuals who are transgender can experience gender dysphoria. Experiencing gender dysphoria does not automatically mean you are transgender. It just means that you're having a distress. And distress stemming from incongruency between your assigned gender and you desired or the genders that you feel more comfortable in. And it still leaves a lot of room to really to consider a lot of other factors. So if you're starting to experiencing or you have been experiencing gender dysphoria, I want to share with you three ways that you can make sense of it. And they all revolve around all aspects of gender. Gender is not just related to our gender identity, our felt sense of who we are. Gender also revolves around our roles of individuals. A lot of our societal roles revolve around gender. Parenting, for example, is incredibly gendered activity. Gender also revolves around our expression, how we express ourselves, how we present ourselves to the world through external ways of dressing, grooming ourselves. All of those things are also can and are gender specific. We still live in a very gendered world where by far and large everything is being gendered in a very binary way. And it is something that is very difficult to avoid for a lot of us. If you're experiencing a gender dysphoria, one of the first things that I encourage you to consider is that is the distress stems and related to a sense of deep felt identity, deep felt sense of this, I'm feeling it because my assigned gender identity, my assigned genders that evolved into my identity is not who I am. Is it perhaps tied more to gender role, how you are perceived in regards to gender, what role you occupy in regards to gender, whether perhaps you disagree with the societally ascribed roles, perhaps you don't feel comfortable having the world project the societal roles onto you, perhaps you feel like there is no outlet for you to express yourself in an alternate role. That's also really, really important. Or is it has something to do, I feeling an element of dysphoria because the way you outwardly express yourself, clothing, makeup, hair, accessories, is the expression, the presentation, the way that you show up, right, in the world. Is that expression that you're not in alignment with, that you feel like it has been imposed on you, and you feel that it doesn't belong to you? And this is the expression that wants to come through. Now, why is considering each one of those three important? Identity, role, and expression. Because all three of them may stem from different things, and all three of them may require different, I would say, different solutions to resolve the conflict that you have with one of them. Now, I worked with a lot of transgender adults, as you know, and for a lot of them, undeniably, it is a gender identity issue, where it's a whole identity that revolves around their assigned gender that doesn't feel congruent. And that in of itself requires a different type of solution. Then for somebody that I see who says, I'm starting to feel a lot of social dysphoria because the role that I occupied is not something that I feel congruent with, but I feel comfortable with my gender identity. In other words, I feel comfortable, for example, identifying as a man. I don't have any distress about it, but I don't feel comfortable with the role that society expects me as a man to occupy and play. I don't feel comfortable how, for example, in my culture or in my environment, I'm supposed to behave, to be, maybe the interests I'm supposed to engage in. All of those don't feel comfortable with me. Now, you see the difference. The individual for whom it is more, the gender dysphoria is starting to show up, social gender dysphoria, as a byproduct of clash with the societal stereotypical role imposed under gender identity. That will require a very different approach for somebody who is actually revolves around gender identity. Now, let's take, for example, a third individual who says, you know what? I feel also comfortable with my gender identity of, in a sense of my assigned gender, totally fine. Um, Maybe even comfortable with their gender role or not. But I really don't like that the certain things socially, the certain ways that socially I am not allowed to be, or if I engaged in the way that I want to show up socially in my presentation, I get boxed into something I'm not, which will also warrant a different type of solution. Gender identity, a lot of times people think that your gender identity, excuse me, I'm still recovering from bronchitis. It's like lasts forever with me. We're socially still brainwashed to believe that gender identity is strongly synonymous with gender role and gender expression. Example, you assigned female at birth equals your gender identity is a woman, equals you're going to occupy the role of a woman in whatever society, cultural context you inhabit. Let's take myself, for example. I'm from former Soviet Union, right? Well, when I grew up, I was told that I should get married, have kids, and become a housewife. That's what I was told because that's what, in my culture, a woman was supposed to be. That's the role she was supposed to occupy. And now let's look at the presentation. I can even hold the three fingers. Let's look at the presentation. And presentation in my society, in my culture, was as a woman, you have to dress womanly. Yes, of course, we could wear pants and things, but we had to be elegant and pretty and take care of ourselves. And even, our body language has to be feminine. When we sit down, we have to cross our legs, and you get the point. Now, for me personally, I feel comfortable with my gender identity. I feel comfortable with my assigned gender. I don't feel comfortable with my gender role. In fact, I think gender roles in general are just all bullshit. Um, so I'm very much an outlier. I went on my own and I did my own things, and I did and continue to do a lot of things that stereotypically in my culture considered anti-womanly to do. Also, I say bullshit to gender expression, even though majority of my expression is stereotypically very womanly. There's also a lot of other things I do that are not. Those things, because I was able to understand, allowed me an outlet to be a more holistic personality where I understood how each one and what significant role each one played in my life and how to externally play it out. Now, if I lived, perhaps if I still lived in Soviet Union, in Russia, perhaps if my also, let's say my parents were not open-minded, supportive, if my parents were rigid, and if the view of no, you have to marry, you gotta have kids, you gotta stay home, you cannot get higher education, you cannot do what you do for a living, you cannot be self-employed businesswoman, I would start feeling gender dysphoria. Chances are I would start feeling some level of distress. I may not have known that it's called gender dysphoria, but I'll start feeling level of distress. So making sense of the gender dysphoria you feel has to start with looking at these three elements. And again, remember, each three don't have to be synonymous with each other, but it's important to understand, and it could be that you're feeling gender dysphoria touching each one of the elements. Especially if you have gender dysphoria stemming primarily from gender identity root issue, chances are you're also going to have discomfort with your gender role and gender presentation, right? That just makes sense. But understanding all of those and how they'll play out is very important because, like I said, gender dysphoria is the distress, but where is the stress coming from? What is this telling us about our relationship to our gender? What does it mean for us? What can be done about it? It's not until you have an understanding of those three vectors. And I had a great video I've done a long time ago on how gender identity doesn't have to be synonymous with gender role and gender expression. I explained how, for example, a person whose identity is a trans woman doesn't have to, can have a masculine gender role and can have, for example, a non-binary gender presentation. That's just example. Understanding all of this are really important because that's what's going to land so many of you to then decide what you need to do. What steps do you need to take to alleviate things you feel? What steps you need to take to help you feel more connected and more congruent with yourself? This is especially for those of you who are younger adults. It's very important to look at identity, role, and expression because you are growing up in a world where we're talking about gender a lot more. We are having a bigger and broader understanding of what it is, also about the role the society has to do in that creating a lot of views about the way we ought to express ourselves and the way we ought um, to behave and the way the roles we ought to take. And so a lot of young adults are questioning all of those elements. And it can be confusing when you start questioning them and you start thinking, oh, I have gender dysphoria and oh, I have to do all of the things without really understanding what is causing what. Comment below, share your thoughts, share if you found yourself having confusion, try starting to understand where things are coming for you. Share, love reading all of your comments, and I will see you all next time. Bye.